The evening was calm, yet the hall carried a quiet tension. Hundreds of people sat waiting, their eyes on the stage where two figures were soon to meet. Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, was scheduled to speak about leadership, respect, and the changing role of technology in human life. Among the audience, Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google, sat silently with his family. Everyone expected a formal event, but no one knew that the moment ahead would become a memory powerful enough to bring tears to even the strongest of hearts. From the very first minute, Modi's presence filled the room. He walked in slowly, greeting people with folded hands, his expression calm but sharp. His words were measured, his voice steady. He spoke about how technology had changed lives, how it had given children in small villages the power to dream beyond borders. He reminded everyone that real progress was not only about success, but also about humility. The hall listened, each word sinking deep like drops of rain in dry soil. Then, in the first unexpected turn, Modi paused and looked directly at Sundar Pichai. Silence stretched across the hall. It was rare for the Prime Minister to break his flow and address someone so personally in front of a large audience. The camera lights turned toward Sundar. He shifted slightly in his chair, unsure of what was about to happen. "Today," Modi began slowly, "I do not want to talk only about leadership in theory. I want to speak about leadership I have witnessed in reality. Sundar Pichai is not just a name the world knows. He is a reminder of what respect, humility, and resilience truly mean." A ripple of surprise moved through the audience. Some leaned forward, others exchanged glances. Sundar's mother, Lakshmi Pichai, lowered her eyes, her hands tightly folded in her lap. She knew her son's journey, the nights he had studied. With a single bulb glowing dimly in their home in Chennai, the sacrifices she had made so he could reach where he stood today. Modi's voice deepened, carrying weight. "I remember when Sundar first visited India after becoming the CEO of Google. There were cameras, there was celebration, but what struck me most was how he bowed first to his parents before acknowledging anyone else. In a world where power often makes people forget their roots, Sundar chose to remind us that greatness is nothing without gratitude." The words hit hard. The hall was quiet, yet heavy with emotion. Sundar's throat tightened. Memories rushed back. His mother preparing food while saving coins. His father working long hours, yet still encouraging him to study. The countless challenges of leaving India to chase dreams in America. He had faced doubt, rejection, and long years of hard work, but he never forgot where he came from. As Modi continued, his tone softened in a way that surprised everyone. "There are many leaders in the world, but few carry kindness as their strongest strength. Sundar, your humility has inspired millions, and today I want to say, not as a prime minister, but as a son of this soil, thank you. Thank you for showing the world that respect is more powerful than pride." A wave of applause broke out. It was not the usual applause of formality. It was the kind that came from hearts touched deeply. Sundar lowered his head, his eyes glistening. He tried to compose himself, but the weight of the tribute was too much. He had always believed in quiet strength. But here, in front of thousands, his silence was louder than any words he could say. The conflict within him grew stronger. He had come prepared to listen, maybe to share a small remark if asked. But he had not expected to be placed in the center of such a tribute. Tears blurred his sight. He fought to steady his breathing, but the emotions refused to let go. The audience was now divided between watching Modi, who stood steady on stage, and Sundar, who sat trying to control his emotions. It was a rare human moment in a place often ruled by scripted words and political speeches. The suspense grew heavier. Would Sundar rise to speak? Would he respond? Or would he let silence carry his answer? In that moment, Lakshmi Pichai touched her son's hand gently. It was a simple gesture, but one filled with meaning. She had seen him as a boy running barefoot. She had seen him as a student struggling through exams. She had seen him as a man carrying the weight of the world's expectations. Now she saw him as her son, humbled by respect from a leader of his nation. Modi, noticing the reaction, took a step back from the microphone. "This," he said softly, "is the strength of humility. It does not need speeches. It speaks through silence. It speaks through tears." The hall erupted in applause again, louder this time, yet even within the noise, the emotional silence of Sundar's heart was louder. The cameras captured it, the rare image of a man who had built a life of logic and technology, yet could not stop tears when touched by the deepest tribute. And this was only the beginning. The night had more twists waiting, more layers of respect, humility and resilience to unfold, moments that would hold the audience longer than they ever expected, moments that would prove why kindness is remembered more than power. The hall was still vibrating with applause when the lights dimmed slightly, casting a softer glow over the stage. Modi stood silent for a moment, allowing the sound to fade. Sundar wiped his eyes discreetly, but the audience had already noticed. Some whispered, others smiled, because they knew they had just witnessed something rare, an honest moment that could not be rehearsed. Then Modi leaned closer to the microphone again. "But let me share something many do not know," he said, his voice lowering, almost like a secret. The journey of Sundar Pichai was not built only by his brilliance. It was also built by the quiet sacrifices of his family. Every eye turned toward Lakshmi Pichai. She tried to hold her composure, but a small tremor passed through her lips. She had never expected to be recognized in such a gathering. In her heart, she carried memories of simple meals, rationed notebooks, and nights when she would pray for her children to succeed even when she could not afford much. Modi continued, "When a child rises to greatness, it is not just his achievement. It is the echo of a mother's prayers, the strength of a father's hard work, and the resilience of a family that stands behind him. Sundar's mother, Lakshmi Ji, is the true leader tonight." The hall gasped, then filled with an emotional silence. Sundar turned toward his mother, stunned. Tears welled in her eyes as Modi gestured gently in her direction. The spotlight shifted, illuminating her face. She looked fragile, yet dignified, like a symbol of every mother whose silent sacrifices remain hidden in the background of success stories. For Sundar, this was the moment he had never imagined. He could accept recognition for his work, but seeing his mother honored before the entire nation was overwhelming. He felt an ache in his chest, an ache of love, gratitude, and guilt. Guilt that he had never said enough thank yous to her. Guilt that he had taken her quiet strength for granted while he ran through the fast tracks of his career. The suspense deepened. Everyone was waiting. Would Lakshmi rise and speak, or would she remain silent? Slowly, shakily, she stood. The hall broke into applause again, but this time it was gentler, filled with warmth rather than thunder. She held the edge of her sari tightly in her hand and took a deep breath. Her voice trembled at first, but then steadied. "I never imagined this day," she said softly. "I only wanted my son to study, to live a life better than ours. We did not have much. There were days when I worried if we could even pay for his books. But Sundar never complained. He kept dreaming, and I kept praying. Today, to hear these words from our Prime Minister, it is more than I ever dreamed." The audience fell into deep silence again. Many wiped their eyes secretly. Sundar lowered his head, unable to look at her without breaking down completely. But Modi did not let the emotion settle too easily. He stepped forward, surprising everyone by folding his hands toward Lakshmi. "We salute you, Ma," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "We salute every mother who sacrifices so her children can stand tall." The gesture was so rare, so unexpected, that the entire hall froze. A prime minister bowing in respect to a mother, it was a sight that shook hearts. Even the cameras hesitated, struggling to capture the depth of the moment. And then, like a tide breaking free, the applause roared again. Some stood on their feet, clapping with tears streaming down their faces. It was no longer just an event. It had become a memory that would live on in the minds of everyone who had witnessed it. For Sundar, the conflict inside grew unbearable. He wanted to run to his mother, to hold her hand, to tell her how much he owed her. Yet he also knew the eyes of the world were upon him. His lips trembled. His hands shook slightly on his lap. He whispered to himself, "How do I ever repay this?" The tribute had become heavier than words. But even heavier moments were still to come. Because when respect rises in one heart, it often awakens memories, wounds, and truths that had been buried for years. And soon, those truths would rise to the surface, turning this night into something even more powerful than anyone had imagined. The hall was still filled with the echo of clapping when silence slowly returned. Sundar sat frozen, his heart heavy with gratitude and disbelief. His mother's words still lingered in the air like a prayer, and Modi's gesture of bowing before her seemed almost unreal. Sundar felt as if time had slowed down, as if every second was reminding him of the countless moments when his family had stood silently behind him while he reached for the stars. But just as the weight of emotion began to settle, Modi changed his tone. He spoke with a sudden firmness that caught everyone's attention. "Tonight," he said, "we are not here to celebrate only success. We are here to remind ourselves that true leadership is born when humility survives, even at the highest peak." His words carried both admiration and challenge. Sundar looked up, sensing something deeper was coming. Modi paused, his eyes steady, on the audience. Many believe greatness is measured by power, by titles, or by wealth. But greatness is measured by how much respect we carry for others, even when the world bows to us. Sundar has shown this again and again. But what the world does not know is how many trials stood in his path and how many times he could have chosen pride. But he chose respect instead. A quiet murmur moved across the hall. People leaned closer, curious. Sundar's mind began racing. What was Modi about to share? What trial? What story? The suspense thickened as Modi took a deep breath. "There was a time," he continued, "when Sundar was invited to a grand ceremony abroad. Many powerful leaders were there, and some treated him as just another face from a developing country. There were whispers, there were doubts. He could have been angry. He could have fought back with arrogance. But do you know what he did? He stayed silent. And then, when it was his turn to speak, he spoke with such humility that even those who had mocked him stood up in respect. The hall stirred. Sundar remembered that day well. It was one of his most painful experiences. He had felt humiliated, looked down upon, judged for his origin. But he had chosen patience over anger, calm over pride, and that choice had changed the entire atmosphere of that event. Modi's voice rose with strength. "This is the power of humility. This is the strength of patience. It silences arrogance, it transforms hatred, and it teaches us that respect is the true crown of leadership." The audience clapped again, but there was something heavier in the air now. It was no longer just admiration, it was reflection. People were thinking of their own lives, their own moments of humiliation, and how often they had chosen anger instead of calm. Sundar's eyes lowered. He could not stop the flood of memories. Rejections during his early career, people doubting his ability, comments about his accent, his background, his simplicity. Every wound resurfaced, but so did the lessons. He had always believed that kindness was stronger than pride, and now, hearing those words from the Prime Minister himself, he felt his heart swell with both pride and humility. Yet within the applause, Sundar noticed something else. His mother was looking at him with eyes that carried both pride and pain. She knew those struggles too well. She knew how many nights he had returned home in silence after facing rejection. She knew the tears he had hidden behind his calm face. The suspense of the night deepened again. The audience waited. Would Sundar finally stand and speak? Would he reveal what those silent struggles had meant to him? Or would he let the tribute continue while he remained quiet, his tears speaking for him? And then, almost unexpectedly, Modi's words shifted toward him directly again. "Sundar," he said softly, "tonight is not only about what I say. Tonight, people want to hear your heart. They have seen your achievements, but they deserve to hear your journey. Will you share with us what respect and humility have meant in your life?" The hall fell silent. Thousands of eyes turned toward Sundar. Cameras zoomed in, capturing every detail of his expression. The world held its breath. Sundar's chest rose and fell slowly. He felt a storm of emotions building inside him. Gratitude for his family, respect for the tribute, but also fear of opening wounds he had always kept hidden. He closed his eyes for a moment, his mother's hand still resting near his. And then he stood. The hall erupted into applause, louder than before. But Sundar raised his hand gently, asking for silence. His voice, when it finally came, was soft, but carried the weight of years of struggle. "I never expected this," he began, his words trembling slightly. "I thought I came here tonight only to listen. But now I realize maybe it is time to speak." The audience leaned in, the suspense thick, the silence so deep that even breaths could be heard. The hall was silent when Sundar began to speak. The applause had faded, but the weight of expectation hung heavy in the air. His voice was calm, almost too calm, yet everyone could feel the tremor of emotion hiding beneath it. "When people look at me today," Sundar said softly, "they see the position, the title, the success. But what they do not see are the nights of doubt, the moments when I felt I was not good enough, the times when I wanted to give up." His words touched something deep inside the audience. Everyone leaned closer. Even Modi, who stood steady on the stage, lowered his head slightly, listening with respect. Sundar continued, "I still remember the first time I left India. I was nervous, carrying a small suitcase, not much money, and a heart full of fear. I did not know if I would survive in a world so different. I faced rejection many times. People laughed at my accent. They doubted my ability, and some even questioned why someone like me deserved a chance." A murmur moved through the hall. Many felt the sting of those words because they had faced similar doubts in their own lives. Sundar paused for a moment, his eyes moist. "But each time I was humiliated, each time I was told I could not make it, I remembered my parents' faces. I remembered my mother saving coins for my books, my father staying awake at night to discuss my dreams. Their sacrifices became my strength. I could not let their efforts go to waste, so I chose silence over anger, humility over pride. And slowly, people began to listen, not because I shouted louder, but because I stayed steady." His voice broke slightly, and the hall grew even more still. Cameras captured every flicker of emotion on his face. The moment felt raw, vulnerable, real. Then Sundar looked toward Modi and said, "Prime Minister Ji, when you spoke of that day abroad, you reminded me of something I had buried deep. That was one of the hardest nights of my life. I was humiliated, treated as small, but I refused to respond with hate. I wanted my actions to speak louder than my wounds. And that night taught me that respect is not given by position. Respect is earned when we refuse to let bitterness control us." The hall erupted into applause, but Sundar lifted his hand again, signaling he was not finished. The audience quieted quickly. His next words carried a sharp twist, something unexpected. "But let me be honest," he said. "There were days when I almost lost that belief. There were times I sat alone, questioning if kindness really had any value in a world that seemed to reward arrogance. There were times I thought, of giving up on humility, of fighting back with the same harshness I received. His voice cracked with emotion, and people gasped. They had never seen Sundar Pichai so open, so vulnerable. But every time, he continued, my mother reminded me with her silence. She never told me to fight. She never told me to hate. She just looked at me with eyes full of patience, and I knew I had to choose the harder path, the path of humility, the path of respect. Lakshmi Pichai wiped her tears quietly. Her son's words were breaking open memories she had carried in silence for years. The audience was spellbound. This was no longer a tribute. This was a confession, a revelation of struggles hidden behind one of the most respected names in the world. Maudi stepped closer, his face soft with emotion. Your honesty, he said gently, is the true strength of a leader. It is easy to show success. It is harder to show the wounds that built that success. The hall applauded again, some standing in respect. But even amidst the applause, a question hung in the air. What more was Sundar about to reveal? Because his voice still carried a weight, a hint that there was another truth, something even deeper waiting to be spoken. The suspense was thick. The audience held its breath. Sundar looked down for a moment, then lifted his eyes, ready to share the part of his story that had never been told before. The silence inside the hall grew so heavy that it felt like time itself had paused. Sundar's hands trembled slightly as he held the microphone. He knew what he was about to share was not easy. For years he had carried it inside, hidden behind his calm smile, his polished speeches, and his quiet dignity. But tonight, with his mother by his side and Modi's words still echoing in the air, he felt it was the right moment. His voice was low, almost breaking. There is something I have never spoken about publicly, he began. People often see my journey as smooth, as if I climbed without falling. But the truth is, I have faced moments when I was very close to giving up everything. Moments when I doubted not only my career but even my place in this world. The hall froze. Some leaned forward in disbelief. Others exchanged glances. No one expected such words from a man known for his steady calm. Sundar took a shaky breath. When I was young, studying abroad, I faced loneliness like I had never known. The world around me was moving fast, but I often felt invisible. I had no wealth, no strong accent to fit in, no connections. There were days when I walked miles just to save money, and nights when I sat in my small room, wondering if I had made a mistake leaving home. I was drowning in doubt. Lakshmi Pichai closed her eyes, tears rolling down her cheeks. She remembered. Those nights, too, the letters that carried more silence than words, the phone calls where her son would speak cheerfully, but his pauses revealed his struggle. Sundar continued. Once, after another rejection at an interview, I returned to my room and broke down. I thought of giving up my studies, of returning to India. I thought maybe I was chasing a dream too big for someone like me. But then I remembered my father's tired eyes and my mother's quiet strength. I told myself, if I quit now, I will not only lose my dream, I will dishonor their sacrifice. And that thought saved me. His voice cracked and the audience sat, frozen, hearts heavy. He wiped his eyes quickly, but kept speaking. People talk about resilience as if it is strength that comes easily. But resilience is not about being fearless. It is about being scared, being broken, and still standing again. I did not stand because I was strong. I stood because I could not let my parents down. I stood because I wanted to prove that kindness and humility were not weaknesses. The hall erupted in soft applause, but many in the audience were already wiping tears. They were not clapping for success. They were clapping for honesty, for the rare courage to share wounds that usually remain hidden. Maudi, watching closely, stepped forward. His voice carried deep respect. This is the truth the world must hear. Greatness is not built on perfection. It is built on struggles that no one sees. Sundar, by sharing this, you have not only honored your family, you have given strength to everyone who feels they are not enough. The audience rose to its feet in applause. It was not just admiration. It was a release of emotion, a recognition that they too carried struggles. And here was a man showing them that struggles could become strength. Sundar lowered his head, overwhelmed. His mother reached for his hand again, and this time, he did not hide his tears. He let them fall, because they were no longer a sign of weakness. They were a sign of truth. And yet, even as the applause thundered, there was still a sense of unfinished weight in the room. Sundar's story had shaken hearts, but everyone could feel there was one more layer, one more truth waiting to be spoken. Something that would not only honor his journey, but also connect every listener to the deepest meaning of respect and kindness. The applause faded slowly, but the silence that followed was even louder. Everyone in the hall could feel it. There was still something left unsaid. Sundar's words had already touched their hearts, but his eyes revealed that he was holding back one final truth, one last piece of his journey that had shaped him into who he was. Sundar took a deep breath, his voice trembling but steady enough to carry across the hall. "There is one more thing I must share," he said softly. "Something I have carried with me for many years, but I never spoke about it. Tonight, after hearing the words of our Prime Minister and feeling the presence of my mother beside me, I feel it is time." The hall grew tense, every ear waiting. Sundar looked down for a moment, gathering strength. "All through my life, I believed success was about proving myself. I thought if I worked harder, if I stayed humble, if I kept pushing forward, people would respect me. But what I learned is that true respect does not come from achievements. It comes from how we treat others even when no one is watching." He paused, his throat tight. "Years ago, before becoming CEO, I was in a meeting where a junior colleague made a mistake. Everyone laughed at him. I felt the pressure to join that laughter to protect my image. But then I saw the fear in his eyes, the same fear I once carried when people doubted me. So I stayed quiet, and when the meeting ended, I spoke to him gently. I told him one mistake does not define a person. That day he thanked me with tears in his eyes, and I realized something. It is not technology, it is not titles, it is not power that changes lives. It is kindness." His words hit like a wave. Many in the audience lowered their heads, reflecting on their own actions. Sundar's eyes filled again, but he continued, "I share this because I know how easy it is to lose ourselves in the race of life. I know how easy it is to forget respect when we are chasing success. But I promise you this, every time I showed kindness, even in small ways, it gave me more strength than any award or achievement ever could." The hall was silent, deeply silent. Even the cameras, though still recording, seemed to move slower, as if afraid to break the moment. Then Sundar turned to his mother and added, "Amma, you always told me that true wealth is not money, but the blessings of people we treat with respect. Tonight I finally understand the full meaning of your words." Lakshmi Pichai's face was wet with tears, her hands trembling. For her, this was not just her son speaking. This was the little boy she had raised, now standing before the world and carrying her lessons as his greatest strength. Modi stepped closer again, his voice filled with admiration. "What you have shared tonight is more than a story. It is a lesson for all of us. When leaders choose humility, when powerful people choose kindness, the world becomes stronger. Sundar, tonight you have reminded us that greatness is not measured in what we own, but in what we give." The audience erupted, in applause once again, this time rising to their feet. Some clapped loudly, Others clapped with tears streaming down their faces. But it was clear, this was no ordinary applause. It was the applause of people whose hearts had been changed. Sundar lowered his head, overwhelmed. He had revealed his struggles, his doubts, and now his deepest truth. But there was still one final step left, one closing moment that would bind the night together forever. The hall was already standing, waves of applause echoing from every corner. Sundar's words had touched hearts in ways no speech ever had. But still, there was a sense that the night was not yet complete. Everyone waited for what would happen next. The final moment that would bind all the emotions together and make this evening unforgettable. Narendra Modi stepped forward once more. His eyes scanned the audience, then returned to Sundar and his mother. His voice was calm, yet carried an intensity that pulled everyone back into silence. "We have spoken of respect," he said softly. "We have spoken of humility, of sacrifice, of kindness. But tonight, I want to do something rare, something this hall may never forget." The suspense gripped every listener. Sundar stood still, his heart pounding, unsure of what Modi meant. Slowly, deliberately, Modi walked down from the stage. The cameras struggled to keep up as he moved across the hall. He stopped directly before Lakshmi Pichai, folded his hands, and bowed deeply. The hall gasped. People could not believe what they were seeing. The Prime Minister of India bowing before the mother of a son who had carried the nation's name across the world. "Ma," Modi said, his voice heavy with emotion, "tonight we honor you, for without your resilience, there would be no Sundar Pichai. Without mothers like you, there would be no leaders who remind the world of humility. Tonight, the nation bows to you." Lakshmi's tears flowed freely. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. Sundar stepped forward instinctively, holding her hand, his own tears running down his face. The audience, unable to contain themselves, erupted into the loudest applause of the night. People stood on their chairs, clapping, some crying openly, some pressing their hands together in silent prayer. It was no longer just a gathering, it had become a sacred moment. Sundar, overwhelmed, finally spoke, his voice shaking. "Prime Minister Ji, I have no words. This tribute is not mine. It belongs to my mother. To every parent who sacrifices silently. To every person who chooses respect when pride would be easier. If tonight means anything, let it be a reminder that kindness is never forgotten." His words carried through the hall, and a deep stillness followed. It was the kind of silence that does not come from emptiness, but from hearts too full to speak. Modi placed a hand gently on Sundar's shoulder. "Remember this," he said quietly. "History does not remember those who spoke the loudest. History remembers those who lived with the most humility." The final applause rose like thunder, shaking the walls of the hall. Tears, smiles, and bowed heads filled the space. Cameras captured every second, knowing the world would soon see what true respect looked like. For Sundar, it was the most emotional night of his life. He had come expecting a simple event, but he was leaving with something greater than any award. He was leaving with his mother's sacrifices honored, his struggles acknowledged, and his belief in humility strengthened forever. Lakshmi held his hand tightly as they sat back down. She whispered, "You have made me proud. But remember, it was never about fame. It was always about goodness." Sundar nodded, tears still shining in his eyes. In that moment, he knew she was right. The world may celebrate success, but it is kindness that makes success meaningful. The night ended not with noise, but with silence, an unforgettable silence where thousands of people carried home a new truth in their hearts.